on today. Father, prayer, Father in heaven, we just thank you for this day. We give you glory and honor for our early rising on this morning and how you have blessed us to see this great and grand day. Thank you that they shall be able to give us the information that you have already downloaded in them, that we may become better men, women, families in our communities and in this world. We thank you for all of the blessings that you've bestowed upon us, and we give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, we say a pleasant good morning to you.
Good morning, Bishop.
Good morning, Bishop. Happy Labor Day to
How
you.
y'all doing today?
Doing great. Happy Labor Day to you.
Happy Labor Day. Labor Day is time to go to work.
How about it? Thanks for that prayer, Bishop, and you have a great day. We appreciate you. All right, good morning. Every day we rise is a great day to be alive, and welcome to the Seven Cities Forums of Hampton Roads presents Portsmouth Coffee Talk. And this morning I'm here with my co-host, Leah Drake Stitt and Thomas the Colonel Chapman, and of course me, yours truly, James Lamothon. Good morning, host. How are you?
Good morning, James.
Happy
Good morning,
Labor Day
everyone.
to you.
Yes,
Yeah.
good morning, Slim.
You know, when I was growing up, I thought Labor Day was about women
Having babies, huh?
and their Labor Day. But as I got older, you learn, you get older and you learn. Yeah, so I'm glad I learned and didn't go out having a conversation about that.
I'm
Labor
glad you
Day
did
being
as
about
well.
women. But anyway, thanks everybody for listening on WGPL 1350 AM and on Facebook Live. And today we have a special guest, and his name is Victor Brown, and he is the Vice President and Chief Technology Officer, U.S. Public Market, IBM. And good morning, Victor.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good morning,
Okay,
Victor.
Before we get started with you, here on Coffee Talk, we always honor a Portsmouth resident or former Portsmouth resident. So, Leah, if you will.
Good morning. It is indeed my honor this morning to share with you our person we selected for today, and none other than Lamar Brown. Lamar is a certified information systems security professional with over 21 years of experience in cybersecurity. He's overseeing the security posture for several high-profile corporate initiatives around the globe and contracts with the DoD and intelligence community. In his previous role with Lockheed Martin, he worked closely with the Chief Information Security Officer and executive leadership regarding various issues pertaining to corporate information, security enablement, and external cyber landscape. He influenced external cybersecurity stakeholders on government legislation, regulation, policy, and defense industrial base. Participation for Lockheed Martin. He also collaborated with the LM Computer Incident Response Team, CIRT, to lead and conduct cyber investigations that involve government entities and external companies affiliated with LM contracts. Lamar supported cyber DFARS implementation, audits, and development of policies and procedures for handling controlled, unclassified information across the LM enterprise. Lamar holds a Bachelor of Science in Technology degree from, behold, the green and gold, Norfolk State University. A Master of Science in Management Information System Technology from the George Washington University School of Business, as well as Chief Information Officer graduate certificate from the George Washington School of Business, sponsored by the Federal CIO Council. So this morning it gives Coffee Talk great pride to salute none other than the brother of Victor Brown, Lamar Brown. Join me today in congratulating Lamar.
All right, Lamar, that's all right.
Lamar, yes.
Okay. Yes, it seemed like technology ran through that family. I don't know.
It did, that's for sure.
I even got lost hearing the description of what he does.
Hey, trying to figure out all this stuff he's doing is the hard part.
Yes, well, we appreciate that, Lamar, and we appreciate you, brother. Victor is a graduate of Churchton High School and also a graduate of the Norfolk State University with a BS and degree in electronics technology. And Victor comes on here, and Leah and I know him well as he was growing up in the city of Portsmouth, all the way back to his high school days. And those of you that grew up in the city of Portsmouth remember Mid City and Hall Farmers at Mid City.
Yes.
And we went there during the 70s and 80s. You remember who ran that store, which is Victor's father, Mr. Brown. Everybody knew Mr. Brown at Hall Farmers at Mid City. And Victor also worked there during his high school days and did a whole lot of things. One thing I remember about Victor during those high school days, Benet and I, my wife Benet and I, anytime we had any technical difficulties or problems or with the components, the simple things like a record player and components, we would call Victor. You know, he was in high school then, and he would come by and just put it together like it was nothing. And I remember one time we were over a friend's house and they were trying to put their equipment together. And I said, let me call Victor, you know, because we were sitting there scratching our heads and trying to figure out. And he came there, and in a few minutes, it was working. So Victor, what he does now started a long time ago when he was in high school, you know. So Victor, let me ask you this. What was, I know you were kind of technical savvy back in high school. I remember when you had a car, you had a phone in your car, and this was in the 80s. Had a car. Nobody had a phone in his car except maybe it was a show back then called Mannix.
Yes, yes.
On TV. We thought that was great. But Victor was riding around as a high schooler with a phone in his car. And probably technically, he probably knew how to do that before most people did, you know. And I don't remember that being offered to the general public, you know.
Yeah, it was different, Slim. Let me tell you what happened there is you know, I did a whole lot with cars and radios and all kinds of things back in those days. And one of the things that intrigued me about cell phones is how much money people would pay for you to put them in a car. And since I was doing all kinds of car installs for electronics, remember I put radios in cars back in. That took a lot of time back in the day too. You couldn't buy a harness and just plug it in. You had to wire that radio to the car. And there was no internet like it is now, where you could just go out and find out how it was wired either. You had to know what you were dealing with. So I learned how to test, and I would put a tone analyzer on each speaker so I could find which speaker it was going to and all that kind of stuff. But it was the installs that got me into the phone. And when I talked to Verizon about it, they said I have the oldest phone number they can find in the system.
Oh, wow.
My first phone number was in 1986.
Ooh.
That was the very first one. And to have a cell phone back then was very expensive for people who didn't know. I mean, it cost 50 cents a minute to talk on a cell phone.
Yeah, yeah.
Back in those days. And 50 cents back then was probably $3 now.
Exactly, exactly.
But yeah, I had a cell phone and I had a TV in there and I had a VCR in that car. And it was back then you just didn't see that. Now it's pretty commonplace to have, you know, videos and movies and stuff like that in the car. But I go on long trips and watch a movie in the car.
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing back then to me. And what sparked your interest? Yeah, because it had to start much earlier than high school. Your interest. I can imagine you getting a transistor radio and taking it apart just to see how it works. So what sparked your interest in electronics, you know, and when start, if you can remember?
You will know, you're gonna know exactly who I'm talking about when I tell this story. I told this story for the first time at the Black Engineer of the Year Awards. I was speaking at the HBCU breakfast at the Black Engineer of the Year Awards, and I told them about this. This is, believe it or not, my Uncle James bought me an electronics kit when I was like 6 or 7 years old. And that's another High Farmers legacy too. He was running Downtown Plaza at that point. And I asked him about it recently. And he told me, he said, look, man, I wanted to get you that for Christmas. And he said, I went to about 4 Radio Shacks to find this thing.
Uh-huh.
And when he gave it to me, I went to town on it. I mean, I was building radios. Mama said, "What are you doing under the sink?" I said, "I need a good ground for this crystal radio to work." So it started there, and I was probably maybe 6 or 7 years old. I was pretty young, but by New Year's I built. It was a 25-in-1. By New Year's I built them all.
Oh, wow.
I built all of them by New Year's. I was connecting them to each other by maybe February. And my mom went and bought me a bigger one.
Uh-huh.
It was a 50-in-1. And then I started connecting the two together. And I don't know, it's a God-given gift to be able to do that so young. I mean, you're talking about somebody 6, 7 years, 8 years old. I wasn't even that old, but he knew I liked that kind of stuff. So it started there, Slim. It started when I was really, really young.
Yeah, and got
in the early 70s.
Yeah, let me mention this too. You formerly worked with Boeing, right?
I did. I was IBM when I worked with Boeing, but yeah, I worked on the air traffic control system for Boeing. For the FAA actually. I was working with Boeing on their aircraft to reduce separation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a TV commercial on that back in the day.
I remember sitting and watching TV, and this national commercial came on for Boeing. I said, "There's Victor," and I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised at all. I knew your abilities. But let me mention this: you are IBM ambassador for Norfolk State and Hampton Universities, and as you mentioned, Black Engineer of the Year Award alumni receiving Modern Day Technology Leader in 2005. So you still involved with our HBCUs, giving back to the university you attended, and well as Hampton. So, and also a part of the Black Engineers Association. So we appreciate that. Let's get into what you actually do at IBM. I gave your title as the Vice President and Chief Technology Officer, U.S. Public Market, IBM. What does that entail?
Well, when you're the Chief Technology Officer, you're leading the technical direction of the organization in that particular environment. So for the federal, state, local, and education environments for IBM, I'm leading their technology landscape. And as part of that, I'm also looking at our future technologies. So I'm looking at where things are coming up from the next 5 to 10 years in the future, and understanding exactly where those are heading. So when you hear people talk about quantum computing, things of that nature, I've been involved in that for some time. And in fact, I was working with the HBCUs, including Norfolk State, to get them in the HBCU quantum program, because our students, it's a different technology and a different way of thinking about computers. You program computers in a certain way, but when you're dealing with a quantum computer, you have to think about it differently, because the computers are zeros and ones normally, but in a quantum system, you have 0, 1, and in between 0 and 1. So it's a different way of thinking about the way things actually work in this environment. And so I spend a lot of my time looking at the future technologies and even our existing technologies to see how they're used. One more thing too, I want to make sure that I was appointed Distinguished Engineer in 2013. To give you an idea how few of us it is, there are 400,000 people in IBM, and there are like 600 Distinguished Engineers corporate-wide. Wow. And the funny thing about it is that I tell people all the time, they say, "How did you come up with that?" I said, really, it's not about, it's an appointment, so you can't apply for the job. You're appointed by the technical people around IBM who know what you do. But what I learned is that a long time ago is that innovation is not something that is really that foreign to all of us. It really isn't. I think a lot of people think, oh, you got to be super smart, you got to be great in math. I'm gonna tell you right now, I was horrible in math in high school.
Ooh.
And Darnell Johnson helped me get through that. I know you might even know Darnell.
Yes.
Yeah, the late Darnell Johnson helped me get through that in junior high school and Then I went to summer school and Mr. White helped me back in the
Yes,
day, you
yes,
know,
yes.
get through that. You have, it's no one gets there on their own, right? Then by the time it's funny, I can do applied math very, very well. If I have a physics problem, I can figure that out. But if you just give me a calculus problem, it's gonna take me a few minutes to get through that.
Uh-huh.
It's a different way of handling it. And once you figure out what works for you, it's a lot easier. So I tell students that all the time is, don't worry about how hard it looks. It's not that hard.
Mm-hmm.
Learn how to apply what you learn in such a way that you can understand it, and then execute from that point forward with it. And that's, if I had just one secret I love to share, it's that one, because everybody can do what I do. You just have to be able to understand how to relate it to what you do and what you know.
Yeah, and I'll add that you have over 30 years experience in this field. So,
Yeah.
Liv or Colonel?
I was thinking,
Yeah.
I said, Mr. Brown, Mr. and Mrs. Brown did an amazing job, because with you and with Lamar, you know, both working with these computers and in engineering and cybersecurity. Not only that, but your daughter and son, they've joined you in this arena. Tell us about your daughter and your son and what they're doing in this engineering world.
Yeah, it's funny. Both of my kids are engineers. My daughter's a material science engineer. She's doing very well. And my son is a computer science engineer. And both of them were exposed to it. I think this is all about exposure
Exactly.
more than anything else. Lamar, I taught Lamar how to write code when he was really, really young. I mean, he was super young,
Mm-hmm.
because we're 13 years apart. So when he was 5, I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
So I taught him how to write code back in the day, and he was really, really young. My dad bought me a Commodore 64, and I never forget it. Mr. Boone from Boone's TV, you guys know Mr. Boone, Joe
Boy,
Boone.
you
Mr.
taking us
Boone would
back.
come over. What'd you say, Leah?
You taking us back. How Farmers, Boone's TV. My goodness.
That's down there near where Ricker's Crab, where
Yes,
Ricker's Crab used to be.
Yes.
But Mr. Boone would sit in there with me, and I would teach him how to do that, because he was trying to get into it in the beginning, and he actually started selling computers before he passed.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, it was just a different way of looking at it. But you know, both of my kids have done very well with it, and I think it's really about them being exposed around it all the time.
Exposure.
I mean,
It's all about exposure.
it's so don't hesitate to take your kids down to the Air and Space Center. My daughter worked at the Air and Space Center when she was young. My son worked at Nauticus downtown
Mm-hmm.
when he was young. And I think that exposing them to those environments intrigued them, and it helped them move forward in the sciences. So please expose your kids to this stuff. I mean, you don't know what you can do if you've never seen it.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
You know,
So that's really what it is.
yeah, Victor.
Yes.
Yeah, you hit some key words there, and especially the word exposure. And I always believe it. The exposure, children, they will expand their horizon. And as you had a career with IBM, we had a family friend, Cleveland Martin, that just passed away. That I don't know if you knew him. That worked for IBM for his entire career. But could you expand on or talk about diversity hiring within IBM? And because we always want our kids to be exposed to going out here in the corporate world once they finish those technical, coming, their degrees and everything.
Oh yeah, IBM was one of the 4 leaders in diversity hiring. I don't think people really understand or realize that.
Yes.
But I mean, we had a Black salesperson when no one else did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was, I have to look at the dates. I have to look up the dates to remember, but it was during that time, there was no one else doing things like that. It's a cornerstone of what we do from a daily basis when it comes to the diversity. And I've met with their diversity and inclusion officer. In fact, the current diversity and inclusion officer was my first manager in the company. And I talked to her all the time about what can we do and what's going on. And it's not just IBM. You're seeing this across all technology companies right now. You're seeing it across Microsoft. You're seeing it across Amazon. This is a great time to be a diverse candidate in this technology arena. And the reason for it is that there's so few of us, which is why I push so hard, because there's so few of us. And the real thing, what we provide by being diverse, we think a little bit differently about problem sets. And some of it is the way we grew up. I remember my grandma, she would do things and I would ask her why. And she said, well, we learned to do it this way.
Exactly.
But they would innovate a little bit and tweak it a little bit, and then they would pass it to that next generation. And that's something that we used to seeing in our community. And honestly, some of us even think and we learn differently. And that helps us innovate as well, because looking at a problem from a different perspective gives you a different view of it. I was awarded a patent in December of last year. And that patent idea came from looking at the problem differently. It's about a secure control plane inside a computer processor. And when I was working on it, I said, man, I think this will solve a problem. Let me write this down. I wrote it down, and then I combined it with someone else who had a patent out there on it, who was looking to do a patent. He and I were talking about different parts of it, and we combined it. And if you look at that patent, you'll see both our names on it. And it's about thinking about a problem, looking at it from a different perspective, putting it down on paper, and then talking to others that are in that field to make sure that it makes sense. And then, people always jump in. Well, if you're thinking about it like this, and I was thinking about it like this, if we put these two together, we can do that. And that's one of the traits I find quite a bit of the HBCU students are very good at that. They're very good at looking at problems and pulling it apart. All students are. But for some reason, HBCU students are good about pulling together those foundational components.
Maybe because a lot of times that we have to face problems with our own lives and everything that others don't have to come up with. So we're always having to solve a problem, even as simplistic as riding down the street and, I hate to say, driving while black. That is a problem nowadays, and so is a simplistic thing. But before I let you move on to something else, got to do some housekeeping here, and also to try to pay some bills. But if you're out there in Electron land, if you like what you're hearing, you can seek to have a sponsorship or send us a donation to Portsmouth Coffee Talk, the P.O. Box 7664. Portsmouth, Virginia, 23707. So I just had to get that out the way while we have this time here. But Victor, one other thing too, you talked about the Black Engineer Association. Is that the same thing as the NTA?
Well, there's NSBE out there, National Society of Black Engineers is one.
Right.
And yeah, there are a couple of them out there, but all of them have the same goal.
Yes.
And that's to let people understand and realize that they're not alone in this field. A lot of times people don't realize how many engineers of color that there really are out there. I remember the first engineer that I met that really got me moving, and you're gonna know this name too. Johnny Johnson. Remember Johnny?
Yes.
Johnny Johnson.
Yes.
Was a professional engineer. Still is, he still got those skills. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I'm gonna give him a call after this. But Johnny lived down the street from me. He lived right around the corner from me. I was his paper boy. I would stop in every morning. Him and Barbara would invite me in, and I would sit there and I would talk to him. He was the first professional engineer of color that I knew. And he was working at the shipyard at the time. And that was a very, very hard thing to get at that time. He was an A&T grad. He is an A&T grad. I mean, he's still around. And Johnny actually, I've told him this before, that he and Barbara helped shape me on that side of it, because he gave me a different view of what being an engineer is. And the same thing with Tyrone Taborn doing the Black Engineer of the Year Awards. It's about people understanding that they're not the only one in those fields that are out there. And really, when Lamar and I were meeting at Black Engineer of the Year Awards together, that was really when it really hit home, when both of us are sitting in there,
Yes.
sitting there talking. And I would tell people that's my brother, and they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. Even though he's a whole lot younger than me, he's my brother.
My brother.
And yeah, and I taught him how to write code, and I taught him all this stuff because he was exposed to it at the house. You couldn't come to my house without something electronic laying out somewhere.
Well,
So it's just how it is. That's the nature of it.
Victor, I know that you going back to Norfolk State and working with HBCUs. Has IBM or any other engineering companies thought about getting people into the high schools before these kids get to the HBCUs or other colleges they're choosing to go to? What are they doing for those high school students?
They're doing a lot. It's a lot going on with the P-Tech schools right now. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but P-Tech is a big thing in all of the computer industry right now. And the P-Tech schools are really about teaching technology at the high school or before level. You really can't take this to the college level without looking back all the way to junior high school. And I've spoken to students in high schools and junior high schools about engineering, technology, and math. I want people to understand that, and now they're putting the arts into this, so you have STEAM, not just STEM. And it's really all about making sure that the exposure factor is there, that they understand that there are programs to support them through high school. And high schools now, I remember taking I remember having a teacher teach me how to program computers in junior high school in Churchland. And a lot of people didn't take that course. And it was interesting to watch it. Back then there were Radio Shack TRS-80 computers. It was a big, we call them trash 80s. They were big. And we would write code on those things. But it's all about that being exposed, and it does start at the junior high and above and earlier levels now, really. You could really teach kids right out of elementary school how to do this stuff. Because the tooling has gotten a lot better than it was back in the day. When Lamar and I were trying to learn this stuff, it was pretty cryptic. Now the generations of the technologies have gotten better and better, and it's almost like writing just a basic script to do a lot of complex things. But yes, all of us are looking at it. And I gotta say this because I'm an IBM executive. I've seen this before. All of my views are my personal views. Of what I'm talking about here. But these types of things really are cutting across the community. And the reason I'm including the other technology companies into everything that we talk about is that it's not about me and it's not about that company. It's about the exposure that there and the programs that are out there that supports our entire community from end to end.
Okay, let me step in and say, as we in a few minutes, 2 minutes, we're going to say goodbye to the radio audience, but we will continue on Facebook Live. And I'd like to thank the radio audience of WGPL 1350 AM for joining us this week. And remember, come back next week as we'll have a representative from the Big Homies program in the city of Portsmouth. So, Victor, as we move on, have a question for you. You know, it's a lot of talk about, people that are technically savvy or maybe not. They know about the cloud system as far as the internet. And you're involved with the IBM cloud and the hybrid cloud solutions. And explain to us, well, I want to sort of connect this with, as we're talking about the young people, students coming up and being involved with this, and the cloud that collects all this data and keeps it up there. How important it is for the students that are involved to be real careful what they put on the internet. because it's going to follow them, especially when you're going into the technical field or any field for that matter. Companies are now looking back at what you've done on the internet. And if you are there smoking cigars and whatever,
Flashing money around on
and whatever, and doing things, it's going to affect you down the road, because there's so much competition in all these fields that if they look at you qualified on the level as this other person, and they look back and see that you got some things on your Facebook page or Instagram or Twitter that are questionable, that other person is going to get that job, even though you are looking. So it's so important to be careful what you do there, especially with the cloud system that's connected to everything you do. And it's
whatever you put in there stays there forever, Slim. I mean, it never goes away, right? Even if you delete something on the internet, it's cached or stored somewhere else.
Yes.
And that's a very true statement. I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people think, oh, I put it out there and then I deleted it. It's not gone.
Yeah.
In fact, Jeopardy had named a new host.
Yeah, talked about him.
A podcast came up that's with some things he had said that were very derogatory, and now he's out of the whole thing. He's no longer the producer either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They do look at your past, and your past in some ways, people change, but when someone hears you say out of your mouth something that's derogatory, it seems to follow you. Yeah. And remember, people always, they might not remember your name or who you are.
Exactly.
They'll always remember how you made them feel.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Right? I know you've heard that over and over and over again, but when I'm speaking in a room with people, always remember that. That they might not remember who I am, but they remember how I made them feel. And if you say something derogatory out there, or you're doing something crazy, people are going to remember how you made them feel. If you made them feel uncomfortable, they'll remember that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then they'll start hunting, and it's just a Google search away now.
Right, yeah. Right. And one of the things, and, of course, people make mistakes. We make mistakes and everything like that. And you have things out there, get ahead of it. Right. You control the narrative. You said some things, and it's a way that you can sort of walk it back and make sure, so it won't be any surprises out there when you're applying for these jobs or you whatever you're doing. And once you get ahead of it, and like you said, some people will never forget, but at least you got ahead of it and you were able to say, that was me then, but this is me now. Mm-hmm. But if you don't say anything and then it pops up, especially if you were talking one way now, and then this stuff pops up. Well, last year or 10 years ago, you said, certain people weren't, things you can say. So how the IBM cloud, what you do with them and the hybrid cloud solutions, what exactly is that? How's IBM, how's that?
Well, when you think about cloud, think of it as a computer system that you lease. Because that's essentially what cloud is. It's the leasing of computer systems to get a job done. So you're leasing computer systems and capability in order so you don't have to run your own data center. You don't have to have your own computer sitting in here. Right now, we're on the cloud. The way Zoom works, we hit zoom.com and we come in together. This is exactly, and then you're actually hitting 2 cloud units because you're hitting Facebook too.
Right.
So you're hitting 2 different cloud systems that actually provide a service to deliver this program. Mm-hmm. But we're doing that without having to know anything about the back ends that are running this. Mm-hmm. We're doing that without having to worry about what it takes to scale this to millions of people. And that's what the cloud is all about, providing capability to anyone to what we call hyperscale across the board and be able to leverage those technologies in any way you see fit to do a business or a service. The hybrid cloud talks about being able to do part of it on premises or part of it in another cloud when you talk about hybrid multi-cloud, and then deliver that as part of the service, because things like banks and other regulated environments, they don't necessarily want to put their data out there. So they bring the technology to where the data is and execute upon it there. So it's interesting, but pretty much everything that every time you stream something off YouTube, every time you do something like a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams or a Cisco WebEx call, anything like that, you're hitting the cloud. And when you hit it, you don't even know which cloud you're on. In some cases, you're on multiple clouds. And they distribute the workloads that way to make sure that you have a good, clean service and it's sustainable during peak times, like at 8 o'clock in the morning when every corporation logs in. Think about it. When one of the things we saw, I don't know if you remember this, but during COVID, in the very beginning, these services struggled a little bit to be stable. And that's because we never thought that we would have every student in the country doing something virtual at the same time.
Right.
And that was part of the cloud. So what they had to do is they had to learn how to scale that up to support these environments that allowed us to have millions of school kids on while you have millions of people working virtually at the exact same time.
Yes.
And we weren't prepared for it.
No.
This is not a company statement. This is a nation. Actually, it was bigger than this nation.
World.
This is a worldwide statement.
Worldwide, yes.
And there's some crossover. I mean, people in Europe are 6 hours ahead of us. But when we come on, those 2 hours, we had European workload and US workload worldwide. And when you think about it, without something that could burst out and without multiple cloud environments you could take advantage of, we may not have been able to pull off continuing to work during COVID. That's a societal impact across the globe that none of us could afford to have.
Victor, what do you see in light of what's going to happen with this internet business? Where are we headed with this thing?
I think you're going to see the cloud grow. I think you're going to see the capabilities and the services offered to continue to grow. There's more and more every day. I see a different level of innovation than I see in the previous year. There's more you can do. There's more capability. It's easier to scale. You don't have to be a serious programmer anymore to program something anymore. There's something called no-code applications that you can build now. It's just drag and drop. So it's beginning to get to the point now that what we used to have a computer science degree to do, someone who has the wherewithal to understand what they're trying to build can actually build it themselves. I think in the future, you're already seeing this. If you look at your cell phone, for example, your cell phone has the compute power of half a data center 15, 20 years ago. I want you to think about the power that a cell phone has in it. I mean, when I say a data center, it's not really a data center. It's more like a system, a big computer system. But think about what you can store in it.
Yes.
And think about the fact that you have a camera, entire computer system in there that can do audio, video, and process all your data. You have it in your pocket and it runs all day long on a single battery charge. That thing is way more powerful than a computer that, 20 years ago that would fill this room I'm in right now. You can't see it because I got the aurora around me. But it's just, that's the reality of where the electronics and the technology in the cloud is going. You're going to see things get smaller and faster and more powerful. And I think eventually, we'll remember back when Dick Tracy used to talk into his watch.
Yeah. How about we're doing that now?
We're doing it now.
We're
doing it right. That Apple Watch you have is probably 10 times more powerful than what Dick Tracy was thinking about. But he was thinking about that, 50s. And the StarTAC phone the reason it was a flip phone came from the Star Trek communicator. So what we saw in science fiction is becoming science fact. And you're going to see a lot of that lead on. But that's a really good question. I know it's
Yes.
a long-winded answer, Slim,
No.
but it's got a lot of pieces to it because it changed the way we work. They overnight changed the way people think about cars when they came up with Uber.
Yeah. Well, you know, Victor, I'm going to bring it back to a little bit, and because you talked about coding, and it brought me back to say, hey, even my grandson, who's in the 5th grade, is taking coding classes, and so if as a parent, what would you tell those parents to how to encourage their children to take those math and sciences and robotics classes rather than just trying to take whatever the state says is mandatory minimum to get out of high school and over there? Because if you want to have something in life, you've got to study, because you have a higher, and you can attest to this, you have a better chance of being a success in life than carrying that ball or bouncing that ball later on. And can you expound to that?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's a very, very good point. I think that a lot of times that parents, they say, well, look, I don't know this math level, and I did well, so I don't necessarily need, the science, the technology, the engineering, and math to be successful. This individual is going to be really, really good with baseball or football or whatever, and they'll be able to make it. But the reality is that football players have backup,
Yes.
right? They went to college and they come out, most of them come out with degrees, and they have a college education to fall back on. And in order to do that, if you're going to get a college education for free or even paid, it should be something that you can use for the rest of your life. It's building a foundation. This is all about foundational learning. Everything that we've talked about this entire, it's hard to believe it's almost 45 minutes because I'm talking amongst friends that I haven't talked to in years, and it's just great. But when you start looking at the foundation that science, technology, and engineering and math creates, those are the foundations that skyscrapers are built on top of, not just homes. And when you think about how much bigger a skyscraper is than a home, it changes your outlook on what your absolute potential is. So to get kids interested in it, explain to them that what they're seeing on that cell phone wouldn't be possible without math. What you're seeing on that cell phone would not be possible without technology at all. What you see on that PS5 and Xbox X would not be possible without the engineering that it takes to build something like that, understanding the thermodynamics to get the heat or the heat sink. I watched them take apart an Xbox X. And to me, the most interesting engineering in it is the heat, the way they handle heat control in that box. They built a tunnel and a heat sink that pulls the air out in a quiet fashion from the bottom of the Xbox, brings it back up to the top. And then it's just a nice piece of engineering. It really is. And when I look at it, I think about it as an engineering solution and a thermodynamics problem that they were dealing with to make sure that that thing could execute when it's under pressure and it's being pushed hard. To generate those graphics takes a lot of power and it generates a lot of heat. The power has to go somewhere, so it turns into heat. And I think that that when kids understand that what they're seeing around them is being enabled by something that it has some power to change their lifestyle for a lifetime, I think they'll look at it a little bit differently than just saying, I need to get an A or a B in math. And I tell you, I've told people this before, I'm not great in math, but I know how to, but if I apply it, I know how to get it done. Right. And you don't have to be great at it. You just have to be able to get through it and understand how to use it. And they're two different things.
Now at IBM, do you all take, how does a student apply as an intern with your company?
Well, it's the same as every company, really. You go online, you go to jobs.whatever.com. So you
Yeah.
can pick your company.
Mhm.
All of us do it the same way.
Mhm.
And a lot of it's word of mouth too. If you're very active in the community, you will find that you're going to get help that you didn't know you had.
Mhm.
A lot of I tell people all the time that I did not get here alone. I had help. And you've heard me talk about it the whole time that we've been having a conversation about the people in the neighborhood that supported me.
Mhm.
About the fact that I stopped by Johnny's house early in the morning while I'm carrying papers there. And for those of you that don't know this, I took papers for 20, how long I take them? I took them till I was 23.
Really?
Until I got married, I took papers.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, and people say, why would you do that? That was my thinking time.
Uh-huh.
I would think while I was riding that route.
Mhm.
And then when it was real cold, I would think about how cold it was, but that's another story. But I was thinking while I was riding that route, and I had people on my route that over the years, they watched me grow up because I started taking them as soon as I was old enough to take them. And so I would do newspapers in the morning, go to school during the day, and Alzheimer's in the evening.
Mm.
And it was a constant, that taught me that I had to work
Work ethic.
in order to survive.
That's right.
And it taught me that you have to think a little bit differently about the kind of work that you're going to have to do.
Mhm.
And I knew that wasn't something I wanted to do for an entire lifetime. You
You
know,
would take papers for the rest of your life or work in a
No.
factory for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
no, I didn't want to do it for like that. But let me tell you though, believe it or not, newspapers got me my first job. That's the reason I was bringing this forward.
Uh-huh.
I was going for a district manager role, and they wouldn't give it to me because they knew I was working on an engineering degree. And I said, why are you holding me back from this role? Because I'm working on an engineering degree. You should be glad I'm working on an engineering degree.
Right.
He said, as soon as you get your engineering degree, you out.
outta
He said,
here.
I need somebody to hang around for a little while. So believe it or not, this manager called someone at Virginia Power, and he called their computer department, and that ended up being my first job.
Wow.
In the field.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up being my first job in the field. So when I talk about word of mouth, being active in the community, everybody knew me in that role. And I remember Chuck Rogers hired me in, and Roland Davis owned that company back then. Yeah, the city councilman. Yeah, back then he owned that company. And they gave me my first chance of engineering in a technology role that was at the bottom of the totem pole.
Mm.
But over the time, I became their chief engineer.
Okay.
And I learned that there was nobody else in there to do a lot of this stuff, so I had to figure it out. But it's all about being active in the community. People know who you are.
Exactly.
Not from what you've done, but necessarily, but how you act and how you make them feel around you. And then be able to execute from there.
Yeah, Victor, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to take it back to how important parental support and family support is. I remember when you were coming up, Mr. Brown made sure you and Greg, and Greg was your other brother who's no longer with us, but Greg was the middle boy, and Mr. Brown made y'all. I mean, it's like not like y'all said, I think I'm gonna go out for football. Mr. Brown, it was kind of imperative that y'all play football. And mindset was, I got to keep these boys busy.
Busy, that's right.
In order to keep them from straying, into something else, that wasn't positive. And that was so important in your life. Even with all those other things you were doing, you had that football season in there. And that was so important as far as all the things that you have talked about up to the point, especially mentioning about the support in the community and what started at home. And people talk about whether it's a 2-family home or 1-family home, that support starting at home is so important. And couple that with what you said earlier too about exposing kids to something that they wouldn't normally be exposed to. Who knew that certain kids might end up an engineer if they weren't exposed to it? So I think it's so important. Talk about how important that home environment you had and how important that was to you. Already had you already wanted that wanted to get into technology even at a younger age. But even when you think like that, your parents or people around you had to keep encouraging you, because I know it was some days you said, man, I want to go to this dance. I want to, do this. But,
They
talk about
keep
how
you grounded. They keep you
Bishop.
grounded. So my mom was an educator. I know you know this, and I
Yes.
know Leah knows it very well because
Yes.
she knew my mom very well. But my mom was an educator from day one. I mean, my mom, a lot of people don't know this. My mom graduated high school at 16, and then she had her master's degree when she was 21.
Okay.
And she got a master's at Hampton, her bachelor's at Norfolk State. And my mom took us to the library every Saturday. I don't mean every other Saturday. Every Saturday. When I was young, she took us to the library every Saturday. And we would go there and we would listen to them read, and then we had to pick a book and read it by the next week. And that cycle continued over and over and over again. And having that support at home was a game changer.
Yes.
I remember when I told my mom I wanted to go into engineering, she said, "Do you think you can handle the math?" I said, "Yes." She said, "That's all I had to hear." She said, she said, "Just work hard and get through it." And that's what she did. Man, my dad supported me as well. Like you said, he made sure that we were busy. He didn't let us
That's true.
just sit around. But I was, some of us might have been overachievers in that, getting up 4 o'clock in the morning, taking papers, and then going to school. And I remember I used to get, I remember even the teachers at school took a lot of time. I remember Miss Taliaferro, Miss Taliaferro,
Norma Talaferro.
She told me.
She was my Spanish teacher.
Yep. I had Miss Cooper for Spanish back in those.
Yes.
But I look back at, Senorita Cooper. I remember, I look back at all of that. And, she used to get on me every day. She knew who I was, right? She knew me. She knew my parents. She knew me. And she used to get on me all the time about being late, because I would take papers, and then it would run into school time sometimes, especially if something happened, like it was a snowstorm or it was bad weather. She said, "You can't be late." And she would give me detention for being late. And it taught me that there's a responsibility that comes with everything that you do.
Exactly.
At the time, I didn't quite get it. She was never mean about it. But she was doing what she had to do, and she was trying to prove a point to me that you just can't be late because you got this other job. Okay, you got this other job. It's great you got this other job, but you late, you going to detention. So it's all.
And they didn't play. They didn't.
No, she didn't play. They all knew. They knew my parents and everything.
Exactly.
I would see them afterwards, and they still, man, they put it on you if they knew your parents. It was actually worse. So the whole community was helping raise us. The support at home was great. My dad sacrificed and bought me a Commodore 64. Back in those days, that thing cost a fortune. He bought it from Sears. I'll never forget it. But you don't get that kind of support without you giving back too. So if you're a student and you want great support from your parents, when they ask you to do something, think about it. Make sure that you do it. And when you start showing that potential, the parents they feel even more empowered to do more for you. It works both ways. It's not a one-way path. Kids think that parents have to do these things.
Right. They don't have to.
Yeah.
They think they're entitled to it. You're not entitled to it. You have to earn it.
Yes.
And
Victor. Yeah, Victor, we're in this society now that we have kids raising kids. And you have talked about having a positive and talked about the environment of growing up. And a lot of times, that environment does not exist today like it did back in what I call the day. But one of the things is you can attest to is being around positive people has a direct effect on your upbringing and what you're going to accomplish in the future. And so I guess a message that you can give to these the kids that are raising kids is just simplistic, just like the lessons of taking your kids to the library, searching where the library is, because I know 5 out of 10 mothers today or parents today couldn't tell you where the local library is. Pull up that Google machine and find out and take them to the library for a couple hours on Saturday and have them read. Because I always said reading is fundamental.
It is.
I always have my kids come up, you had to read, got to get in there and read, got to read. Okay, just read. And it's going to come out and it's going to pay positive benefits later on.
Yeah, and it really pays it when you get older. I remember watching my granddaddy sit down with a stack of Reader's Digest.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knows what I'm talking about, but some of the younger viewers might not know what Reader's Digest is. Reader's Digest was a small book that had many stories in it.
Right.
My granddaddy used to sit down with a stack of them, and he would sit down and read the whole stack.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'd get another stack, and he'd read that whole stack. And my daughter reads like that. She'll take a book and she'll read it, and then she'll get another book and read it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what reading does is it changes the way you look at your boundaries, because you can see things in a book and imagine it. Everybody imagines it slightly differently.
Mm-hmm.
You're building a world around what you're reading. And you're right, it's really important. You know, the foundation across the whole community, reading out there at the library, being exposed. I had an assignment in middle school, and it was really about, I was told you have to do a something on deoxyribonucleic acid,
Yes.
DNA.
DNA.
I went to the library and I spent weeks studying DNA. And even to this day, I remember all of those components of DNA. The adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. I remember it like it was yesterday. Now, why do I remember that 35 years later, 40 years later? The reason I remember it is because I read it over and over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And when you read something repeatedly, it helps you remember. For the elderly that are out there, the more you read, the more dynamic it creates your memory.
Right.
Over time. Even if you're suffering with a little bit of memory loss, if you start reading, it'll start clicking better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's proven.
Mm-hmm.
So it not only affects the way our kids perform, it affects you, but the way you perform regardless of your age.
Mm-hmm.
Now for a quick question, one quick question. How were you selected for that IBM commercial?
Oh, that was a good one. I worked on that project. I was actually, I worked on the next generation air traffic control system, and someone mentioned it to someone in marketing. And I was asked to interview. And for those of you that know me, I used to be a DJ, so I put on my theater quality voice at that time. I talked to him on the phone, and I used what I knew how to use from the radio days, and back when I was doing Battle of the DJs at Scope on WRAP and all that kind of stuff. It worked out really well. And they did an interview similar to what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing I knew, I was sitting at LAX on the West Coast filming that. We did 32 takes of that commercial. There are 3 versions of it, but they only ran one.
Uh-huh.
It ran about 300 times during the US Open, and also all the way through the Christmas holidays. It ran all the way through the basketball and all of that. And it was an eye-opener to me to do that, because it gave me the opportunity to get my Screen Actors Guild card, for one thing.
Okay, go ahead.
But it also taught me, I watched them build that.
Right.
And that was awesome to watch them do it. They were building the planes while I was actually, right after I finished it, they would build the planes, and they were building that video. And I had a markup of it before I left the set.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I was chosen for it. I worked on the project, and then they asked me to do it.
And what are these voiceovers that you're doing?
Well, it's just like anything else. You know, when you get out there, I did voiceovers. When you saw me doing that voiceover, that was actually for the commercial.
Okay, okay,
Because I went to New York and did the voiceovers after we filmed it.
okay, all right.
And you learn, I will tell you this, when you're on TV, you learn about your little twitches. I learned about all kinds of stuff I was doing wrong when I was filming that commercial, when I talked.
Mm-hmm.
Speak, you know, nervous energy, things like that. It's different when they only see your face. When they see your whole body, you got to watch what you're doing with your hands.
Yes, yes.
So it taught me how to actually, it helped me with public speaking, to be honest. But it was an awesome thing. And for you kids out there, you probably want to know how I learned about the air traffic control system. You know what I did is I started working on a pilot's license.
Okay.
The best way to learn it is to immerse yourself in it.
Exactly.
Remember that. So that's the best way to do it. We're almost out of time, Slim.
Yeah, we're gonna wind down now, but I see right now at some point we're gonna have to have you back because I appreciate the lessons that you relayed to us and the listening and watching audience. And you know, they say all the athletes are not going pro, and not everybody's going to be an engineer, but the lessons learned about how you get to be anything in life are all the same. So, you know, people can take whatever you said and apply it to whatever they want to do and make sure, you know, you just have to start early and sacrifice. And you talked about the parents and the way you treat your parents, because a lot of things, they'll do anything for you. And a lot of times it's a sacrifice for them. They have to give up something that they want in order to do, but they don't mind doing it. Or we don't mind doing it if you're getting that cooperation from the children that you're raising. And you have to be in charge. I'll put that out there. But anyway, Victor, we really thank you for coming on and talking with us this week and spreading your knowledge and telling us how you got to where you are. I think it's going to be something that everyone appreciates. And I appreciate you shouting out Johnny Johnson. He might be up now, but he will watch this because I see him tuning in. So thanks for that shout out for Johnny Johnson and all the other people that you mentioned. I'm sure a lot of people that's been around a while that's gonna bring back memories for them. Mr. White and all those people you mentioned.
Miss Cooper and
yes.
Yeah, it takes a community, right? And I appreciate what you're doing, giving us an opportunity for people who grew up in Portsmouth to come back. And it makes me feel honored to be on with friends because I know all of you, but even if I didn't know you, I would appreciate that. I mean, you guys watch me grow up.
Yeah.
You know, and so I want to thank you for being positive role models.
Yeah,
all of you.
Well, thank you. And that's what Coffee Talk is all about, making sure, you know, it's a lot of good things happening in Portland, even though the headlines and news breaks don't represent that. Exactly. So we feel obligated to present to the people about people who came through the Portsmouth system. And like we all mentioned earlier, our earlier shows, everybody went to Northam. Not everybody went to Northam, so we have people on here from Northam, Western Branch, Churchland, Western Branch, Craddock, and place like that. So we're just concerned about, in general, the people that come through Portsmouth and going on to do great things and giving them an opportunity. All the people we talk to want to come back and contribute, and they are contributing, but not everybody knows what they're doing. And, and they want the opportunity to come back and do whatever they can for the city that raised them.
Yeah.
And
thanks for that opportunity.
If you want to go and find some people, you're looking for people who are working in different fields, who are giving back to the community, go to Portsmouth Coffee Talks YouTube page. We have over 35 individuals who have come back to share what they're doing in their field of work. And so you need good speakers, somebody to come back, talk to your kids, talk to organizations. Go to Coffee Talks YouTube page, subscribe and share, and you will find all types of people that you can bring back to your organization. And you are definitely one that if I had an organization, you would be my guest speaker.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. That means a lot to me, especially coming from you. I mean, we go way back.
Yes, we
I won't
do.
tell people how many years, but they knew me when I was a kid,
That's
Yeah,
right. That's
a
right.
really young kid.
yeah.
Watch you three boys grow up.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Brown is smiling, and your mom, they're both smiling right now, knowing
Yeah.
Thank you so much. They gave us such a good, they gave us something awesome to follow, and that's a blessing. It really is.
and
Yeah.
they continually gave back to the community.
Yeah, for those, I got to give Benet a shout out too, because Benet used to help me all the time with that register back there. Benet knew that computer register in that hall farm was like nobody else.
Yes, she
Yeah.
did.
You close that thing out in the back real fast. Nobody knew it like Benet. Daddy even had Benet do all that stuff. So
Uh-huh.
shout out to Benet for helping me sell shoes and helping me through all those years when when you 16 years old, not being able to get off on a Friday night is like the end of the world if you're not playing. You know, when I'm playing football, of course, he had to let me off because I was playing for church.
Uh-huh.
But when he didn't let me off, sometimes Benet would let me go. She said, "Go ahead." She would let me
I
go
know
about
she
7,
would.
right after he leave. Right after Daddy leaves, she said, "I got it. You go ahead." But I knew it was nice to have Benet was my big sister. She still is my big sister, and she
Yeah.
always helped me. So I got to shout out to her, and I got to also shout out to my wife. She did a lot of work to help my kids along. I can't talk about this without talking about her. My wife Teresa, who spent a lot of her time making sure that those kids got to everything while I was running all over the country doing all kinds of stuff. No one does this by themselves. Everybody has support.
Yes.
And now she's an artist. She actually has an exhibit going on in the MacArthur Center right now in the offsite gallery. And if you may have saw on the paper yesterday, she was on the front cover of the Clipper yesterday, when they were talking about her racial inequality work that she's doing. So,
Okay.
Okay.
so it's interesting.
I'm glad you got a chance to mention that. And I mentioned your brother Greg earlier, and I know he's smiling down on his two
Exactly.
brothers. And I can remember 3 of y'all. And like you said, Lamar was much younger, but y'all were role model kids. I mean, you know, but you know where it started. Mr. Brown was kind of stern. You
Oh,
Yeah,
know,
he was kind of stern. Daddy was something else. But you know what? As I got older, I appreciated it more and more. And he and I used to talk about it. You do appreciate it when you get older.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I understand it from a different perspective now that I'm a father too.
Right, indeed. Well, again, thank you, Victor. We really appreciate it, and we enjoyed this conversation, and we look forward to having you back again. But we want to thank, and Portsmouth Coffee Talk is here for our voice.
Our community.
And our future.
And we want to thank everyone on Facebook Live and earlier on the radio for watching. And remember to tune in next week when we will have a representative from Big Homies. It's a program that works with the youth here in the city of Portsmouth through sports, and they're doing a lot of other innovative things. So tune in next week as we have Mr. Swinson on to tell us about what they're doing. And because we have a lot of groups out here that are doing things that are not highly publicized, and that's talking to him. That's the way they wanted it starting out, but now they're getting the attention for what they're doing, and we really need groups like that out here to solve these grassroots problems that we're having with our youth today. Exactly. And thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next week. And thank you, Victor, and thank you, co-host. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Great day.
Have a good week. God bless you.
Thank you
You
all.
know what, Victor, you made getting up on a holiday morning at 5 o'clock a lot easier, believe me.
You know what? I set the alarm this morning. I don't usually do that, but I set the alarm this morning, and I set it for 5:45. And the next thing I knew, it was 6:15. I said, I got to get it.
It comes fast in the morning.
I kind of overslept too, you know.
I called Slim. I said, "What's wrong, Slim? I mean, are we having problems this morning?"
Yeah, she called me, and I act like I was awake, but I was dead asleep.
Oh man! But you know what though? This was great. Thank you all for taking the time to invite me, and I just love to give back. You guys are doing. I really
Thank
do.
you.
This is you know, don't discount it, because it means a lot.
It does.
Even
Okay.
if you just touch one person.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how we feel. You know, some shows, they go for the ratings. As they got to have confrontations, you know, because that sells. Everybody watch that, and their numbers go up, you know, because people want to see that kind of stuff, and that's okay if that's entertainment. But our goal is to share information that you can use,
Exactly.
and that might help someone.
Exactly.
So again, as we try to close out again, thanks. Take care and have a great
Take
day.
care, everybody.
Thank you,
All right.
sweetheart.
Later.
Safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Stop the recording.